very much. Very important and significant statement, one that's both dramatic and disturbing in terms of what is happening internationally, different sections of the world. You've referred in your testimony the tendency to blame others. And you've also heard that on the agendas of some country, they're thinking about putting some restrictions on terms of world travel. Can you elaborate on both of those points?
Yes, sir. In terms of the stigmatization and the blaming of others, this appears to be part of the initial reflex reaction in almost every society to the appearance of this disease. Anxiety is high, and the desire to find someone to blame or a scapegoat is often high as well. Several countries have introduced proposals of different kinds to restrict international travel. And the World Health Organization, which is responsible also for the international health regulations, is taking a strong stand against the imposition of those kinds of restrictions, which we believe will have no beneficial effect in preventing the transmission of the virus.
What sort of restrictions? I think that's rather an unusual, to say the least, kind of requirement. What are we talking about that you might?
Mr. Chairman, there have been proposals to restrict the travel of what you might call the routine traveler, routine international short-term traveler, if that person cannot present a certificate showing that they are not infected with the virus. A certificate which not only could be easily fraudulently produced, but which in itself provides no guarantee of protection, provides really no fundamentally useful information for prevention of transmission. In addition, there have been proposals to restrict the scholarships that could be given to students if the student is infected. And finally, there have been restrictions proposed regarding long-term visa applicants, guest workers, if they wish to enter the country. All of these are based on the idea, the false idea, that by identifying infected people, you can somehow protect the home population. When this was proposed in the United Kingdom, however, it was pointed out that there are already 30,000 to 60,000 infected people in the United Kingdom, and that the desire to exclude a few African students who might be infected appeared to not have major disease prevention significance.
Is this being considered in what parts of the world? Western Europe?
These kind of restrictions are being considered in a variety of parts of the world. There have been several initial suggestions proposed in the Americas, which have, through the results of the work of the Pan American Health Organization, been successfully never really came to any kind of fruition. There has been proposals in several parts of the Middle East in this regard, and also proposals in Europe. The European proposals have focused on students and long-term visa applicants. In the United States, a proposal at one time had also been presented to address the same question.
How do you think your message can be effectively spread worldwide? Do you feel that there's been sufficient efforts to bring international representatives together to exchange aids, information, and to coordinate efforts?
Yes and no. There have been the major international conferences which the World Health Organization co-sponsors. First one in Atlanta, then in Paris, and then in Washington in June of this year. And in addition, we at WHO have had a series of meetings and expect to have roughly 50 meetings during the next year on various aspects of international AIDS. I think it has taken a while for organizations and for peoples to realize just how broad the scope of this problem is. And I think in the next year we're going to hear a lot more about the social and economic impact rather than just the limited health impact in international forums.
About a month ago, the World Health Organization announced its plan to combat AIDS. Could you briefly summarize the plan?
The essence of the program, Mr. Chairman, involves the development of strong national AIDS prevention and control programs. Every country in the world needs this kind of program that starts by assessing the scope of the problem and then develops a series of concrete activities for which WHO has established the blueprint, how to proceed, and what sort of steps are necessary. And these, of course, include such issues as the surveillance aspect, the laboratory capability, the education and training of health professionals, and then the prevention programs to prevent sexual transmission, transmission through blood and blood products, and transmission from mother to child. These are the key components of what every country in the world needs, but many countries need tremendous support in order to be able to implement. In some Central African countries where AIDS is a severe problem, the annual health budget per capita is less than $1. In those situations, without the addition of external aid, an AIDS prevention and control program is not a possibility. In addition, there's a need for the international leadership and coordination because many of these issues, such as the international travel issue, require international consensus. And the strongest force we have, in a sense, is the moral suasion that comes from the agreement of the best scientific minds in the world to address a particular issue. And if those minds say that there is no danger for an AIDS virus-infected person to travel on an aircraft, then we believe that the moral force of that argument will carry.
What else do you think that the United States ought to be doing as far as its role internationally?
Well, certainly, Mr. Chairman, we are looking for support from the United States, for significant support, both in terms of the technical resource, people, and the financial resource to be able to implement the 1987 action plan and the plans beyond that. It's important that this kind of international AIDS control effort have the resource that's required, a resource that will grow rapidly as the awareness and ability of countries to deal with the problem increases.
What is, the World Health Organization is facing the financial difficulties. Could you tell us, in terms of this particular program, the battle internationally on AIDS, what are you talking about in terms of their effort? The World Health has been very, very involved in the past in eradicating a variety of different kinds of disease, scourges, plagues, others. Now they've identified a action program internationally. What is its estimated cost?
The estimated cost for 1987 is $43 million.
88, what do you?
We will know in about 4 months, with some experience of 87, what 88 will cost. You must realize, Mr. Chairman, that in this area, the key unknown variable is the extent to which countries will indeed take on the challenge of global AIDS control. That figure could easily increase tenfold within 2 years.
Well, what's your estimate of your budget for 1990?
The 1990 estimate for the budget for global AIDS control approaches $1 to $1.5 billion.
And you believe that that's, professionally and scientifically believe that that kind of resource is necessary to battle this internationally?
Without question, and that includes the requirement for the non-governmental organizations and the myriad of other organizations to include their work, and that work is not included in the total sum.
And what kind of pledges do you have up to this point to try and give you some kind of assurance that the world community is going to take this kind of plan seriously?
Well, first, Mr. Chairman, I must say that the response to AIDS has changed dramatically in 1 year, and that 6 months ago, on the basis of a $12 million request for funding for 2 years for the World Health Organization AIDS program, we received $9 million of that $12 million from 7 countries, of which $2 million came from the United States. Now we're going back to those countries and saying our assessment of the problem is such that $43 million is needed in 1987 alone. And all of those countries, without exception, have spoken positively of the need to do this kind of program and of the need for the additional resource. Now, whether the resource that would be available in 1990 or 1991 will truly become available, I think depends entirely on what happens and on the perception. But when we look at the fact that 2 years ago, people didn't even realize that AIDS was a global problem, and that now we understand the true global magnitude and the threat it represents, I think that in 1 year from now, Mr. Chairman, I could speak in front of this committee and tell you about the dramatic increase in availability of funding as a result of increased awareness.
Well, I hope you're right. How many people do you have now working on this with regards to W.H.O? How many are assigned to this?
The WHO AIDS program, which started in June of '86, started with 1 professional, increased to 3, and Dr. Mahler has indicated that I will have 15 professionals working in the staff as of later next week. In other words, this is being done with the real rob Peter to pay Paul principle. This is being done by taking people on a short-term basis from other important programs within WHO and establishing the critical mass of approximately 15 professionals that will allow us to initiate and implement the 1987 action plan.
Well, for something that really is of a global threat, and something which we're going to eventually end up investing a good deal of resources, both from a research and educational point of view, and billions of dollars in terms of care, to think that and to recognize the international and global scope of this whole challenge. We're starting off internationally, with 3 professional people. It seems to be, we don't question, your leadership and your commitment and dedication, or Dr. Mao of the W.H.O., but it's certainly an effort that must be and should be supported, and hopefully would be, and we'll certainly work with you here in the Congress to try and gain that support. Dr. Mann, 1 month ago, the world was surprised with the news that a vaccine trial had started in Zaire. What can you tell us about that trial?
Mr. Chairman, I can tell you, unfortunately, little of a scientific nature about that trial. This trial was brought to our attention, actually, by the media, and most of what the World Health Organization knows about this trial, it has read in the newspapers, French and American. What appears to have happened, according to these reports, is that a vaccine trial has indeed been underway in Zaire for a period of at least several months, and we are eagerly awaiting the scientific information that will allow us to assess whether this trial contributes or does not contribute to the ultimate development of a vaccine available for large populations.
Well, given the need for international coordination, isn't it unusual for a secret vaccine trial to be underway?
Well, I think it's extremely unfortunate. And in fact, the World Health Organization had a meeting in mid-December where we brought 5 American, 4 European, and 4 African experts together and agreed that it's critical in this area that the clinical trials of AIDS vaccine, because they are of such importance to the entire world, be done in a scientifically open manner involving the international scientific community and in a socially and ethically acceptable manner. The real disaster would be if a vaccine were inadequately tested somewhere, pronounced to be effective in the media, but yet not effective or not accessible on the basis of the information that was developed. That would create a disaster because the pressure to use the vaccine would be intense, and the unfortunate consequence could ensue where a vaccine that doesn't protect or even hurts could be used in millions of people, and that could even delay the ultimate development of a vaccine that would truly protect. So we are strongly committed to the need for international collaboration and communication in the vaccine development area.
Well, I think you've talked about it briefly, but what's really the danger of an individual secret trial that does not have the larger research community, both in terms of the issue, progress on the issue, and for the individual as well?
For the individuals involved, there is always the concern about the human rights. There should be the concern about the human rights, the ethical standards under which this vaccine would be tested, and I'm sure that other members, other people who have spoken to you this morning could speak quite eloquently about the need for ethical safeguards in vaccine field trial development, particularly with AIDS vaccine. The other danger is that a vaccine field trial might not be adequately well designed or adequately well conducted. These are difficult to perform. When we get to the final payoff, which is the question, does a vaccine work? Does it protect? That is going to be an extraordinarily difficult process which may take several years to figure out, to decide on the basis of scientific evidence. And if one proceeds too rapidly...
Wait a minute, just on this point. You
Yes.
mean from the time the vaccine is actually developed till the time that you have information that would indicate its
that it
effectiveness?
works. Yes, sir.
Maybe what? How long did you say?
We would estimate it could be as long as several years.
Several years.
That's right. And that just emphasizes and underlines the complexity of the work. It is not easy to conduct a vaccine field trial, and efforts by people who may not be in contact with the real experts internationally in this field could conduct a trial with good faith but with inadequate scientific credibility. And that's where we all could be the losers. The international scientific community offers the best chance to get the best minds working on this problem.
You're concerned that it may create false hope and false answers.
False hope, false answers, and if we imagine the scenario where a vaccine that did not work was proclaimed as a vaccine that worked and was used by people who then abandoned their safer practices, believing that they were protected, I think the magnitude of that kind of misinformation is clear.
Is there anything that you can tell us about the French test? I mean, have you made any kind of medical assessment as to its effectiveness or its?
Mr. Chairman, we have no facts. We know that a vaccine is being used, and we don't really even know the numbers of people involved. We don't know the manner in which those people were selected. We don't know what tests have been used to determine the effectiveness of the so-called vaccine. I think it must be considered to be highly preliminary, and that our best interests lie in sharing of the information as rapidly as possible.
Given the great interest in the development of the vaccine, both in the private and public spheres, and in this country and in other countries, is it realistic to expect coordination in vaccine development and testing?
It will be difficult in this area because this is AIDS, and because of the intensity of public and professional involvement with this subject. On the other hand, the World Health Organization has a track record. We have a track record in vaccine development. We have a track record in research management. We have a track record in establishing standards and guidelines for international use. I think that we must make this effort, which ultimately boils down to an effort of voluntary participation by vaccine manufacturers, scientists, and others throughout the world, to realize that the benefits of collaboration benefit the whole world, and that this problem is too important to leave to any one laboratory or to any one research facility. However, we may not succeed, but the alternative to trying is potential chaos in this area.
Well, I wonder, do you have an estimate as to the number of the people that, say, 1991 worldwide would be infected? We have heard figures up to close to 150 million people.
The World Health Organization estimate, the one that you quoted, in fact, in your opening remarks, is 50 to 100 million.
I see.
And this is speculative. As I suggested
right.
earlier, if it enters the Asian populations, 100 million is an excessively conservative figure.
I see. I just want to, for our audience here and those that are watching, to mention about the World Health Organization. They've been perhaps more responsible for the eradication of smallpox than any other organization, any group in the world, and they've made very significant progress in the malaria, typhoid, typhus, the yellow fever, rabies, schistosomiasis, and others. So they're speaking from a track record of profound experience, and I think when they warn us about the global implications of this, we ignore that at our own risk. That has enormously significant importance to us as a people and also as a country in terms of what we can do as a leader of the free world. Senator Adams?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no questions. I appreciate the testimony of the witnesses, and I apologize to the Chairman. I've been over in the nuclear threshold test ban treaty area. Otherwise, I would have been here with you.
Thank you very much. We want to thank, we're delighted to have Dr. St. John here. I imagine that Dr. Mann was, when he was talking about the global implications, was talking about Central America and the hemisphere as well. And we're welcome and thank you for joining us here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
gentlemen.